Hey guys, I'm going to pick up where I left off talking about chapter 7. This is part 2. There is liability that corporations have on the corporate officers and the directors. So they are personally liable for the crimes that they commit, regardless of the motivation. So say, well, I really did it because it was. I did it was because I thought it was in the best interest of the company or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. They're still personally held liable. And they may be held liable for employees that they supervise. If their employee does something that's bad, they may be held liable for that as well. So that's called the responsible corporate officer doctrine. Case in point 7.7, I did not put a page number on that in your slides, but it's on page 144. It's the Roscoe family owned the customer company, which operated an underground storage tank that leaked gasoline. An employee, John Johnson, reported the leak to the state environmental agency, and the Roscoes hired an environmental services firm to clean up the spill. The cleanup did not occur immediately, however. The state sent many notices to John Roscoe, a corporate officer, warning him that the company was violating the federal and state environmental laws. He gave the letters to Johnson, who passed them on to the services firm, but the spill was not cleaned up. The state eventually filed criminal charges against the corporation and the Roscoes individually. They were convicted under the responsible corporate officer doctrine. They were in a position of responsibility and had influence over the corporation's actions, and their failure to act constituted a violation of environmental laws. So you don't want to do that. That's bad. I did not mean to do that. Okay, there we go. There's different types of crimes, and I think these are kind of fun to go through just because people are stupid and it's kind of fun to see the kinds of things that they do. So there's 5 categories of violent crimes. There are crimes against persons. There's property crime, public order crime, white collar crime, and organized crime. So violent crime are crimes they're called crimes against persons. They cause others to suffer in some way, up to and including death. So the examples you're probably most familiar with: murder, sexual assault, rape, robbery. I think this is kind of an interesting classification. So there's robbery, which is I think you're probably familiar with what robbery is, but taking of money, personal property, or any other article of value from a person by means of force or fear. So just stealing from someone is not robbery. That may be theft and it may be larceny, but there has to be force or fear. So I have to threaten you in some way. I could say, give me your money or I'll do something bad, whatever. So that constitutes robbery. Now, if I say, give me your money or I'll shoot you, that's aggravated robbery. If I have a gun or you believe that I have a weapon or something like that, anytime you see aggravated on the front of a crime, so aggravated battery, aggravated assault, any of those things, aggravated means that someone had a deadly weapon with them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a gun or a knife or something like that. It could be something that they could use as a deadly weapon. And then there are different degrees of classification for every violent crime that exists. So the example 7.8 on page 145, you might wonder why I have a picture of Flavor Flav on there. But former rap star Flavor Flav, if anyone knows his real name, that would be a fun thing to play that game. His real name is William Drayton. Which is less exciting than Flavor Flav. He was arrested in Vegas in 2012 on assault and battery charges. During an argument with his fiancée, he allegedly threw her to the ground and then grabbed 2 kitchen knives and chased her son. So he's one of those real winners. So that would be aggravated assault and battery. The second classification is property crime, and property crime is the most common activity of criminals. And obviously the offender hopes to get money or property or something or just damage. Sometimes it's just the matter of damaging something that people like. So there's burglary and aggravated burglary, and that's on page 145. It talks about that. This is, I think, a really interesting kind of clarification here. And if you don't have the book, I'll kind of go through this a little bit more detail here. Traditionally, burglary was defined as breaking and entering the dwelling of another at night with the intent to commit a felony. So, if you intended to go in and take something from someone, if they were going to charge you with burglary, it had to be done at nighttime. This definition was aimed at protecting an individual's home and its occupants. Most states have eliminated some of the requirements found in that common law definition. The time of day at which the breaking and entering occurs, for example, is usually immaterial, so they don't care about the time of day anymore. Some state statutes frequently omit the element of breaking, so you don't actually have to break in, you just have to enter. And some states do not require the building be a dwelling. So, for example, if you entered a business, that could still be constituted as burglary. If they have a deadly weapon, it can be aggravated burglary. Larceny is another type of property crime. Larceny has to do, and we talked about this earlier when I brought this up, pickpocketing, or sometimes you could even call, I can't come up with the name of it right now. Embezzlement could be part of a larceny type experience. So taking company products and supplies home for personal use without permission, that's larceny. I didn't threaten anybody to do it. I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't break in anywhere. I was there anyway, and I just happened to take it home. And then another one is obtaining goods by false pretenses. So I tell you that, this is happening to a lot of elderly people right now. I tell you that I need your banking information so that I can make sure, like, that I pretend that I'm the IRS and I need your banking information so I can deposit your stimulus check. That is obtaining goods by false pretenses or obtaining money. So credit card fraud is one example of that. It's typically called petty theft if it's small in value, and grand theft, so think of the game Grand Theft Auto, higher value. So there's a threshold of dollar value that exists there. And there's an example actually in your book, and I don't think I assigned it. It's called People versus Whitmer, and they actually, it involves a sales manager of a sports vehicle dealership was charged under a state statute with grand theft. So if you're interested in that, you can read on that on page 146 and 147. It's also a crime, and I think this is kind of an interesting one. It's also a crime to receive stolen goods. So say you bought something on eBay or Poshmark or Mercari or whatever, you bought something, or Facebook Marketplace even, that's kind of a more common one that a lot of people would take stolen goods to. It's a crime to receive goods that you know or should have known were stolen or not that person's to give or to sell, which is kind of scary. I think the should have known part. To be convicted, the recipient of such goods need not know the true identity of the owner or the thief and need not to have paid for the goods. So you can be convicted of this even if you didn't pay for them. All that is necessary is that the recipient knows or should know that the goods are stolen, which implies an intent to deprive the true owner of the goods. So you need to be really mindful when you buy things off of Facebook Marketplace or any of those sites, to make sure that those goods, you have confidence in the person you're buying from to some degree. So do a little bit of research just to protect yourself. Okay, arson. Arson and larceny, I used to get confused. Larceny has to do with stealing. Arson has to do with fire. They just sound similar to me. Arson is willful and malicious burning of a building. So you light something on fire. It's arson. Forgery, you've probably all forged your parents' signature at some point. I'm not expressing any support for such activity, but fraudulent making or altering of any writing that changes the legal rights and liabilities of another person. So the example 7.9 on page 147, without authorization, Severson signs Bennett's name to the back of a check made out to Bennett and attempts to cash it. Severson is committing forgery. Maybe I can get it to go to the next slide. Okay. Public order crime. So say you have a habit of getting drunk and running down the 77. And this could be clothed or not clothed, I guess, or illegal drug use, prostitution, gambling, things like that are considered to be things that are contrary to what is valuable for the community. So the public, against public value. They're often called victimless crimes, and that's because there isn't a person attached to the other end of the crime necessarily. I'm not burning your house down or stealing your property. I'm just doing things that aren't necessarily good for anybody. They are believed that you might say, why are they even crimes? That's ridiculous if there's no victim. Well, they consider them detrimental to society because if you have a bunch of people that are allowed to run drunken around town, for example, that's going to lead to other negative behaviors. The book example of this is a man flying from Texas to California on a commercial airliner becomes angry and yells obscenities at a flight attendant when a beverage cart strikes his knee. After the pilot diverts the plane and makes an unscheduled landing at a nearby airport, the police remove the passenger and arrest him. If the man is later found guilty of the public order crime of interfering with a flight crew, he may be sentenced to more than 2 years in prison. So, and I don't know if that was before or after 9/11, but that would be totally different now too. White collar crime is another kind of category. In the kind of, if you think white collar versus blue collar, typically blue collar people think factory workers, things like that, people who actually do like hands-on real labor. White collar, typically, I think it's named that just because people that commit white collar crimes are people that wear typically white collars on their shirts, like collared shirts. But typically these are just confined to crimes in the context of business setting. So committed by an individual or business entity using some nonviolent means, so it falls out of this category the minute violence is introduced, to obtain a business or personal advantage. So you guys did an assignment a while back, I don't remember what chapter it was, where somebody stole documents from someone else and stole documents and then took them to the next company and used them for advantage. That would be a white collar crime. So some examples, we'll go through a little bit more of each of these, probably have to spill into the next video, but embezzlement is one of them, mail and wire fraud, bribery, bankruptcy fraud, insider trading, and theft of trade secrets, which is what that other one was talking about. So embezzlement is somebody who's entrusted with somebody's property and they fraudulently appropriate it. So I do think that this clarification on this slide is important. It's not larceny because the wrongdoer doesn't physically take the possession. I just reappropriated it to myself, for example. It's not robbery because I didn't use force or fear. And even if you said, hey, I was going to give it back. Yeah, that doesn't work. So Bernie Madoff is a great example of this, embezzling funds, just channeling them into my own bank account so that they do me good and not the person to whom they belong. Mail and wire fraud is another example of a white collar crime. So sometimes you'll see these crimes stacked upon each other. So if you use the mail to commit any of these crimes, then they will add on the charge of mail and wire fraud. So the example in your book, Cisco Systems offers a warranty program to authorized retailers of Cisco parts. I can't pronounce his name, we'll just call him Frank. And Robert Kendrick devised a scheme to intentionally defraud Cisco with respect to this program and obtain replacement parts to which they were not entitled. The two men planned and used specific language in numerous emails and internet service requests that they sent to Cisco to convince Cisco to ship them new parts via commercial carriers. Ultimately, they were convicted of mail and wire fraud and conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud. So this the government takes very seriously. So there's imprisonment for up to 20 years. And if you use some type of disaster to do this, to appropriate the funds, then it's even more serious. So I'll pick that up in the next video.